Yeah, I mean, just before this, like I don't really have an agenda other than like let's have a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, totally. Yeah. I just want to jam about, what you've been working on and some of the ideas I've had, um, where things
Yeah,
are going. Yeah.
yeah. I'd actually, I mean, would love to start. I first came across your work because someone on Sublime, which is the tool I'm working on,
Mm.
created a collection called Intentionality.
Oh,
And
cool.
as the description of the collection, he said, intentionality is about the connection between what you're doing and why you're doing it. Malcolm Ocean. So I didn't really know much of you, but I've fallen very kind of deep down this rabbit hole of kind of thinking through how we can make the internet more intentional. And your kind of name and definition is very kind of present, top of mind.
Mm. Oh, that's cool. That's cool to hear that. Yeah, it's been like, I used to call the app that I have, um, I used to call it a productivity app. And then I sort of realized, like, well, it's actually not really about producing. It's about what is the thing it's about? And eventually kind of coming to refer to intentionality, um,
Mm.
which is sort of, there from like from the very beginning, it had intentions as like this object, which are distinct from tasks. Um, in that you don't uh like with a task, you can kind of put it in the system while being ambivalent about whether you are actually intending to do it. Um, but then with an intention, it's like, no, this is a thing that I'm intending to do today. And
Mhm.
so it takes on a more kind of alive, connected flavor.
I love that you say that because in the journey of building kind of a product, a software, and kind of manifesting a vision, the power of kind of language and figuring out like how to kind of map when something's really new and novel, it's really hard for people to truly like understand what it is. And a little word can make a big difference. If you tell me that you have an app designed to make you more intentional instead of more productive, it immediately says so much about
Mhm.
what that is and also what it's not. And I think similarly with Sublime, I think a lot about the shift from attention to intention, but also the shift from productivity to creativity. And
Mhm.
because productivity is all about speed, getting
Efficiency, yeah.
done faster,
Yeah.
more efficiently. And actually, creativity is the opposite of efficiency. It's about kind of meandering and, slowly kind of stumbling upon this one insight that leads to another one that leads to a breakthrough. And it requires just, a very different mindset than the mindset of somebody that's just trying to
Trying to bang out stuff. Yeah.
bang something out.
Yeah.
So I think similar to you when you were working on a productivity tool, I also felt like productivity for me, the antidote was creativity. And then
Mm-hmm.
also like the antidote to the attention economy, the feeds that kind of keep you trapped is really the intention economy where you set, and I hate these labels, because somebody woke up one day and said attention economy, but I'm realizing more and more that for something to catch on, you need to kind of distill it down to like these, like labels that
Yeah.
resonate with people.
Yeah, totally. And I'm curious, like why do you hate the labels?
I think the reason I hate the label, like I guess I hate a specific label around like the experience economy, the like back,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
I mean, the attention economy feels like it's on a different level of abstraction than experience economy.
in what sense?
Well, I feel like experience economy is talking about like a type of thing that's now being sold. And the
Right.
attention economy is talking about a type of currency which things are now being bought in.
Interesting. Interesting. I mean, I think the way I see it is like a lot of these labels are created by, like the VC think piece that needs to kind of, manifest this new space to make that space investable. So maybe that's a little bit of kind of my aversion to it. I think it strips a lot of the nuance, but I
Hmm.
also acknowledge that it it like the moment that I thought of Sublime as like, oh, there's attention networks and there's intention networks. That
Hmm.
label is so clarifying.
Hmm.
And I think that it seems similar to the magic you were describing you felt when when you realized what you were building was not really a productivity thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like w one of the principles I have there. Now this is kind of going down a level of abstraction. I don't know, maybe you'll appreciate it. It's basically like that if you have a machine, like there's a sense in which you want it to be as efficient as possible, right? Subject to a few other constraints, like, you want it to produce a high quality product, you want it to not break down, right? So you don't want to run it so fast that it like, explodes, right? But there's a way in which like, aside from that, you want it to work as efficiently, smoothly as possible. As a person, if you save 10 minutes on a task, like it takes 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes, but the way that you save it causes you to hate the task, what have you saved exactly? You
Yeah.
don't get to live longer. So you haven't saved time, you've not created more time for your life. You now have 10 minutes that you can potentially spend on something else.
Yeah.
But if the way that you are habitually spending your time in the first place is making yourself miserable, then you're probably just going to spend those 10 minutes also making yourself miserable.
Ooh. I want to go much deeper on this because yeah, it's always, I think, a mistake to equate productivity and organization with creativity.
Mm-hmm.
There are, I think, things that will help you in the execution stage of a project. But the things that I think are more and more valuable today are the things that will help you come up with the interesting thing to work on in the first place.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah.
And that's where I feel like we're about to see this like big undoing of what like basically like we're realizing there's a lot of things that machines can do and there's a
Mm-hmm,
lot of
mm-hmm.
things that humans can do, but in some sense, like we as humans have been taught to behave like machines for so long
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's just gonna be a rude awakening. And
Yeah.
frankly, like in my own like personal knowledge management habits, I've like when I look back at the way that I was kind of organizing and storing knowledge 2 years ago, and it's just so different because the stuff that the machines can do, like I was being a machine. I was thinking of tagging. Now I'm thinking about how do I create intentional, meaningful contexts
Mm-hmm.
that I want to kind of it just changes from like what is if I see something that resonates, I'm no longer thinking like, oh, does this relate to this tag or this tag? I'm thinking in what meaningful creative context can this belong? And it just changes like my relationship to the thing because I'm no longer trying to do what the machines can do better.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I just think there's something really interesting about machines are trying to be more human. Humans have been trying to be more like machines, and now we just have like a lot of social questions around how do we human in this
Yeah.
new world.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's this word coming to mind for me that's something like participation. It's like insofar as I have a sense of what you're doing that is different now than before in terms of your, knowledge management and that kind of stuff. It's like there's a participatory quality where it's like you're creating a context where you and other people are participating in the sense making. And, AIs can also like be part of the medium through which that happens by distilling, summarizing, linking, relating, connecting, whatever. Yeah, and then the other big piece here is I think people I think people are getting tripped up by kind of reductionist materialism, like implicit reductionist materialist ideas of what people are, what humans are. And specifically, um, they'll act um, like the AI is like an agent, and the AI may be able to execute a task, but there's something very, very fundamentally different between um, certainly current LLMs and humans or even squirrels, which is that things do not matter to an LLM. The LLM does not care. And relatedly, but I think distinctly, the LLM does not mean anything. It says stuff, but it doesn't mean any of it. Now it can have meaning to you, it can be helpful, blah, 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 blah. And so it's like, okay, well, what is the nature of matteringness? What is the nature of meaning? And that's part of where we get to like, okay, so the uh the AI, can help you devise a strategy for what to do, right? So like, when you talk about like, okay, the difference between a machine versus like a person, it's like one person might say, well, but like, the AI can also help with like the decision making and so on. It's like, yeah, given something that matters, the AI might be able to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
But
But
the
what
AI doesn't have matteringness.
right. Yeah. And I think that you just articulated what I feel is a nuance lacking in this space, which is how you feel about AI almost comes down to whether you think that art and creation is about producing things or whether it's a way of like operating in the world as a
Mm.
person, as a spiritual, emotional, intellectual creature, because that's the matter, right? The creation is only interesting insofar as it comes from that matter.
And
So
insofar as it then matters to someone,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, art, a drawing that is made that people see, but it doesn't matter to any of them.
yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It's not, it may be worth something in that someone is willing to pay for it, but it's not worth anything in the sense of mattering.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got it into there was a pretty heated debate on Twitter a couple of months ago. Some very kind of prolific tech VC said something about how in the future there will be no music or no kind of artists, musicians, because everyone will get their own personal playlist driven by their taste, whatever. And I responded like completely disagree because music is a promise that you aren't listening alone, that you and that you're connecting with someone over that something. I feel connected to this artist for some reason. And yeah, I guess it surprises me that a lot of these takes seem to fundamentally misunderstand culture.
Um, right. And misunderstand meaning.
What
Like,
gives people meaning? Yeah,
well, and yeah, I feel like even the phrase gives people meaning. It feels too like as if meaning is something you can kind of hand over. Like what does meaning?
yeah.
What 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 arises as meaning? What makes meaning? I'm not giving you meaning right now. You're not giving me meaning. We could say this conversation is giving us meaning, but
Generates
we're
meaning.
we're making the meaning. Like it's right, like we're participating in it. We're doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's happening through and as us.
I love that. We're participating in it. That the participation piece of it feels really important.
Yeah. Hmm.
I want to learn more. You started off by talking about this kind of moment where you've realized you were building an app for intentionality instead of productivity. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about what led you down the path of building this thing, how you feel about it today. how do you relate to intentionality today in both your software and how you kind of show up?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one that's uh been actively being tilled in my world. Um, so interestingly, I, the pathway to how I ended up creating the software actually involves a bit of music, which is to say that in 2012 I had I got this goals workbook, and one of the goals that I was most excited to work on was I wanted to record an album of music. This is while I was in university, and I thought, like university is easy enough. I can add, other projects on top of it. And so let's record this album of music. And I did, by kind of doing some advanced thinking, and deciding I wanted to do it, and then planning it out and booking studio time and finishing writing and arranging the songs and so forth. And then I was like, the next year, I was like, I want to start a business. It was like my new goal. Um, and in particular for me, I wanted to start a business that would allow me to not have to get a job when I graduated. And And so I was feeling into like, okay, what do I want this business to be? And I ended up deciding to try to sort of turn this paper workbook into an app. And um and so I did that. I started working on it. And so it kind of evolved to look like to resemble a to-do list. And again, in the original when I sort of first created it, I was definitely sort of taking for granted that the relevant thing that it did for you was make you more productive. Um But already from the beginning, it was very different. I mean, it was sort of measuring like output or something like that, but it was much more measuring something like the extent to which the things that you are orienting towards big picture are things that actually matter to you. And two, the question of, are you managing to be in touch with those things that you are sort of theoretically oriented to big picture, like record an album or build a business or, you know, run a marathon or, whatever the goal is. Um, like, are you in touch with those things on a day-to-day basis? Like, are you actually doing stuff towards those, or are you just kind of either A, doing random things, like kind of scattered, you know, uh, bouncing around on the various corners of the internet or whatever, either random things or things that like are productive but don't matter. And so I guess yeah, in a way it's been about that sense of matteringness from the beginning. Even though I was framing it in terms of productivity. And I would probably say at times, productivity that matters or something like that. There definitely was like in language, it was like, helping you work on what matters to you. Um, and I was contrasting it with a lot of the other kind of to-do list type things I was seeing at the time were saying things like, never forget another grocery ingredient again. And I'm like, okay, sure. But like there's more to life than like remembering the milk. Um,
Yep. It's interesting that so much of it hinges on people knowing what matters to them. And
mhm.
so much of what I'm thinking about is how the internet today makes it hard to really know how you feel, what you want, because we are so stuck in this passive consumption mode that it's no wonder that it's profoundly unsettling our hobbies have kind of boiled down to nothing more than just consumption.
Hmm.
And that makes it very hard to create the pockets of stillness and quiet and self-inquiry to figure out what matters to you. I
Yeah.
think about that a lot in the context of just the push versus the pull internet, right? Like so many
Mhm.
are just stuck in this like,
Yeah.
we open like the more addictive, the more exciting experiences are the ones where you open up and you just get like a dopamine hit
Yeah.
from the randomness. But the stuff that's intentional, where it's like me sitting in my Google Doc or my studio or my workspace trying to like just focus on this essay, what like all of that stuff feels a lot harder.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and I think it doesn't have to. Uh,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that that part of it is like if we invert the consumption model of the internet, where ideas come to you and you get sort of like just in time epiphanies as you need them based on what matters to you in the moment, that there's a way for those to feel just as exciting as
Even
what
more exciting because they're relevant.
as they're relevant. Exactly. But yeah, I guess like that's so distant from the way that the internet exists today. Um, that I wonder because
Yeah.
so much of what when I talk to people about Sublime and they're interested in building and curating their personal knowledge library on Sublime, like the tool in the space like helps you, but ultimately you have to come with an understanding of what matters to you. Uh, and
Yeah.
there's no shortcut to that. It's the important work, and the good work often feels hard because it's kind of supposed to be hard, and we're in this convenience trolley where we don't have to kind of face these questions. So anyway, I'm rambling. I'm not making a lot of sense, but I'm thinking a lot about kind of push versus pull, attention versus intention, search. Like to me, like search when you have an intention is so powerful, and LLMs unlock just very different, more interesting ways of kind of searching and retrieving the internet. Yeah, I'm curious where your mind goes with all this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that comes up for me is like a while ago, I had a recognition of like, okay, before I like in order to really have the kind of dedicated focus that I want to have in the morning, I want to I want to curate my experience of my attention in a very particular way, and I sort of shorthanded it as no feeds. Um, but to be much more precise about that, what I really mean is no uh like intentionally creating a barrier between myself and any system that will give me information that I did not ask for. So if I'm searching something, okay, great. But a feed is not that, right? And you know, and then you get some subtle edge cases, right? Where it's like, okay, suppose that like I wanted to prepare for this call with you by checking out what you'd been tweeting recently. I didn't do this, but I sometimes do. Um, if I go to your Twitter profile, right, I can scroll down and see what you've tweeted recently. And in some sense, this is in fact exactly what I asked for. But in another sense, it's also like could be anything, right? Like it's not an answer to a particular question, except insofar as that question is what have you been tweeting lately? And like arguably, if I go just to my Twitter home for you timeline, whatever, that's the answer to a question. What is Twitter tweeting lately? It's sort of like this kind of but it's like that's not a real it's not a real question or something. It's not a closed question. Like it's not a question I mean, that's not even literally true. But anyway, there's a clear intuition of what I mean, even if like it's sort of technically hard to precisely define it, right? Um, and interestingly, email and messenger apps have the same property. They give you stuff you didn't ask for. You open your messenger app to send a message to one person, and what you get is this message from that person, this message from this other person, this message from this other person. You didn't ask for any of that stuff.
Yeah,
And so even
yeah,
though that's not even algorithmically you know, uh, generated or curated or whatever, but it's still like, imagine if in
it's
order
still
imagine if in
using
order to
part.
call someone, imagine if in order to call someone, you had to first like wade through a bunch of voice memos.
Yeah,
Like that would be ridiculous. Like, obviously, you should
totally.
just be able to place the call, but there's no way to just send a message without dealing with your inbox. Like,
Yeah, it's
at
yeah,
least seeing it or kind
yeah,
of trying not
yeah.
to look, right? It's like,
it's definitely a design challenge, but I also think that it also boils down to incentives. In the case of opening up my iMessage, although I can go in to send one message and then forget what I went to do because I have 5 unread messages that I have to respond to.
Yeah,
And that, I agree, there's like a lot of design space there to explore. But the system itself is not designed to keep me addicted
totally,
to
totally. Yeah,
on
those
time.
ones are kind of neutral. Like they don't have an incentive to do what they, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're kind of
And I think,
neutral.
yeah, and like the tension that I feel is I don't think it's I don't think what I'm advocating for is an internet that is 100% like I set the intention, I go find it, because I
This,
think
you need the serendipity.
you need the serendipity.
Totally.
Like sometimes I don't know what I want to know. I
Yeah,
don't know what matters to me. I need to kind of go broad and kind of and explore.
totally. Or
I
or
think
sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes sometimes I have ideas percolating, and what finally prompts me to write them is seeing somebody else's tweet that's either inspiration in a positive sense or something I'm like, here is exactly the misunderstanding that I want to correct, right? And which is, I mean, a different kind of inspiration, right? Like it's actually truly helpful when somebody is wrong on the internet in a way that inspires you to write an essay,
yeah,
like,
totally.
but like, yeah, so sometimes you need that inspiration, you need that kind of that serendipity and so forth. But like I feel like almost like I don't know, I want the ability to like tune the serendipity, right? So it's like I want a giant dial, a giant lever
Yeah.
or something with notches all the way over to don't show me literally anything that isn't directly the answer to a question that I just asked. And then over here is like, bombard me with absurd chaos, even stuff you don't think I'll like. And then
Yeah.
like, and most of the internet kind of hangs out here-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd like to spend a lot more time here-ish,
Yeah.
kind of closer to that first one.
I mean, I wanna talk about that because I don't know, like my mind when you say that there is this world of, in a perfect world, you could tune your Twitter algorithm to reflect, the sentiment that you want or whatever. But I also think that the average person is just too lazy and wants the good default. So I'm curious where like, like end user programming, like how does how do we get to a world where we're not all just exposed to the same algorithm, acknowledging that like most people like they just want the thing to work. Most people aren't
Totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think like literally letting people have custom algorithms at all would be just such a huge step because it changes what it means that you're subject to an algorithm because you now are sort of even if you choose to stick with the default, that's not a thing you have to do anymore.
yeah,
So that's like thing one. Thing two, I mean, I think the way to do it is just to like allow for viral spread, basically, where it's like you can embed like the algorithm in a tweet and be like, hey, want to try this different algorithm? Push this button, right? And you could just like talk about here, I made this algorithm, which like, is like
yeah,
designed to pick you up if you're having a bad day, right? So it's like you can use that
yeah,
curated
yeah.
or um or whatever. Like I think there's a ton of space for like something like evolutionary software, like software that's designed to like have modular elements of it that are um that people can sort of remix and share their remixes of. And in a way, like browser extensions are kind of this, but they don't let you do things like control social media algorithms. And part of the issue there, of course, is the advertising stuff, right? Like you've got to somehow deal with that in the context of
But say more about the ad. So, because like in a perfect world, there's this Twitter network, and you could experience that network through many different front ends clients that
exactly. Yeah.
optimize for different things.
Yeah.
Some may be optimized for inspiration, some may be optimized for news and staying current on the
Yeah,
world. Some may be optimized for outrage, that is like a theoretical future. And I know a lot of the Web3 folks, like that is like one of the theoretical promises of this kind of like interoperable
totally.
blockchain world. We've yet to kind of see that, but it makes sense, at least theoretically. What you're saying is that that doesn't solve for the incentives, because maybe like maybe a good example is Tumblr, where maybe the vibes were too kind of good and chill, and it never managed to create like to be a product that was like just where ads could be effective. Is
Well,
that what you're saying? Like that there's just
yeah,
this.
I mean, the whole premise of ads, of selling ads, like so like Google's original sale of ads on search results was in a way kind of wholesome. You have a person who wants a thing, and Google is going to serve its best answers to that thing. But if you think that the person who's searching that thing wants whatever you're selling, you get to pay to like show it to them, basically, right? There's a kind of wholesomeness to that. Um,
It makes sense.
yeah, but like you're on Twitter and people are just showing you random stuff, right? And it's like maybe vaguely demographically targeted, but it's not relevant, right? And people will say, well, relevant ads, like blah, blah, like there's a thing about relevant ads and privacy and all of that, but like that's yeah, what am I getting at here? The like, Google's search ads, do they have an incentive to get you to search more? I mean, they have an incentive to get you to use Google more, right? Like as opposed to other search engines. And yeah, they kind of have an incentive to get you to search more, but it's not that bad. Whereas like a website that's like it has an incentive to just keep you on it scrolling, and actually to keep you scrolling, not deeply engaged with something. That's not good, right? Like that's you're so at odds with what would be wholesome for the user there.
Totally.
And like, I think it would be a hard sell, but I don't think it would be um inappropriate for a government to actually say, no, sorry, that's illegal. Like you can't do that. You can't mix crack in with the bread that you're selling at the corner store. Like you can't mix ads in with like user whatever. Like I mean, it's not as extreme as that, but it's yeah. I have a friend who thinks that advertisements should be illegal, and I think that that's an interesting take. Like
Yeah, I mean,
it gets
yeah,
hard because can you put a sign up for your own restaurant on the restaurant's property? Like clearly yes. Okay, can where do you draw the line? But there's a point, you know. Anyway,
yeah. I mean, I tend to think it's much more nuanced than that, because I mean, what the business models of the internet, it's either you pay for the product or you are the product.
yeah,
And I don't think that subscription is the solution to everything, because, there it's like social media is both good and bad, like it does mean that anyone has a platform. I can reach absolutely anyone.
totally.
It's
And so
also
many small businesses have succeeded because of Facebook ads. And like I do want to give Facebook credit for that, even as I also think that they have, fucked up democracy and done a few various other things,
yeah,
increased partisan or like political polarization and so forth.
yeah, all of that. But also part of what feels like human nature is not fixed. Like different
Mm-hmm.
experiences bring out different sides of us.
It's really funny. You started your sentence human nature, and I'm like, I'm probably going to disagree with anything you could possibly say about human nature. Oh, except that. Right? Like when people are like human nature is just blah blah blah. I'm like, no.
Like, like when I'm on Instagram, I feel like being the person that travels to beautiful places and takes beautiful photos. When I'm on Twitter, it brings out a different side of
Right,
the
right.
person that is me. And so I guess like I'm very much of, the kind of medium is the message.
Yeah.
Um, we shape our tools, the tools shape us.
So
But
so so let's talk about, what would be good, like leaving aside advertising, leaving aside the exact business models and stuff, but just like what would be a good vibe, what would be a good feel for something. Um, I really like the idea of plugging in a uh I don't know if Sublime is quite the thing for this. But maybe it is. It's something like I want to be able to be writing on a topic, and by default, the like while I'm typing, the place that I'm typing is not quite like sending me like here are related things. Because maybe I'm already in a flow, I don't need, this new
Interruption.
article that I now want to read because it's exciting and intriguing and relates to, yeah. Um, but something like if I get stuck, then I push a button and then I get like relevant stuff. I
Yeah.
get like, but I get it like, I don't know, maybe like one at a time. Like I really think there's something about the tendency to surface a ton of stuff all at once that's like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It depends on the thing. I mean, I actually think that LLMs would be better if they gave two or three responses in parallel because sometimes people will ask the LLM for advice and not realize that the LLM will say a completely different thing each time. Like the LLM does not actually have an opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it does, but like, eh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. 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 Definitely the mechanic of how it's surfaced, how many, whether it's infinite scroll or something else, is interesting. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, that is exactly the journey we're on. I think you started by asking what is the feeling, and the for me the feeling that I want Sublime to have is the calm vibes of a library
hmm
with the aliveness of something like a coffee shop or social space. Meaning,
hmm
on the internet, you're either alone in your Apple Notes,
hmm
just you, Malcolm, with his thoughts, or you are broadcasting your thoughts to the world on Twitter.
Right, yeah.
What I think is really interesting is that the motivation when I use Sublime is personal utility. I am doing this for myself. I'm curating my own knowledge repository. I'm furthering some kind of, going deep down a rabbit hole that I've sort of defined for myself. I'm not in broadcasting mode, but that focus and intentionality exists within a world that is alive and brings serendipity and says like, oh, this thing that you're thinking about over here, there's this other person thinking about this right here, and you can kind of see the mechanic. Actually, like the best mechanic for discovery on Sublime is you're building out your library,
Yeah.
and
And then you find overlapping and related libraries.
related ideas.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of step one, is like let you build your library, but in this kind of multiplayer environment where it's used in single player mode, but it's kind of magical in multiplayer mode because unlike something like a Notion or whatever that is very finite, you can start with an insight that you have and you can kind of travel the kind of graph
Yeah.
and discover other people's thoughts. So that's kind of step one. Now, the way that I think about the knowledge loop is there's consumption. You first have to consume stuff, then kind of collect stuff,
hmm
curate, collect stuff. And then you have to use that to create new forms of knowledge and meaning,
hmm
right? So Sublime, like where we are in the journey right now, is we've built the interface to kind of collect and create your library. The next step is the goal is not just to consume and collect more information. That's just hoarding. The goal is to help you create with that.
Yeah.
The next
Yeah.
thing we're working on is Sublime Docs, which is exactly what you were describing.
Mm-hmm.
As you're typing, you get to recall different thoughts and ideas from your library and other people's. And like you said, there's a lot of, execution questions around like how do we make sure that that experience is like allows you to kind of remain in flow state. But it's like, yeah, it feels like just such a fertile design space to explore.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. I'm really looking forward to getting the chance to try it.
Yeah, today I'll
Yeah.
send you an.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about reminds me of an idea that um my friend Chow Chu and I had like 2 years ago now, I think. Um, which we were calling it omnitext. Um, and it was something like the idea being that like you just you open up what's kind of like a blank something and you just start typing. And based on both like maybe the content and also the structure of what you type, different sort of affordances become available. And um, so maybe you start with some journaling and then you get into something like, oh, I want to send a message to this person about this thing. And then like a little box appears that's like compose message, with a send message button. And you can start like,
Mm,
typing into that box or even copy paste what you just wrote into that
mm,
box or whatever. And it would, be able to send it to that person without you having to go over and check Messenger.
mm,
And then you start typing about like, yeah, anyway, so okay, like what do I want to do today? Well, maybe I want to like work on the last few posts in my I can tell for myself sequence that I'm writing right now. And and then it would, and this is maybe not the best example, but like it would surface, oh, here's stuff written by people over the last like it would somehow create affordances, right, for reading or engaging with like uh I mean it maybe would pull up your own drafts, right? Like in this case I have some drafts about this topic, right? And um and it might even, I recently realized, so this is a live example for me. I have this sequence of posts. I've written 8 or 9 of them, and I have like 2 or 3 more to go, I think. And I recently realized, oh, I have some drafts from last June that actually might make a helpful case study as part of tying off this sequence. Like brilliant. But like I easily could have not noticed that. But I don't think it would be unreasonable for a relatively smart AI system to actually surface like, hey, is this old draft relevant? Like it doesn't say that it is, it's not
yeah.
like tagged as part of this sequence, but I don't know, it seems kind of relevant here, right? And then like I could notice that. So it would sort of plug me into mine and other people's writing that's relevant. And also in a real-time way might surface other people who are using the app. Now, obviously, you need a certain scale to do this. Other people who are using the app who are writing about a similar thing right now.
Mhm.
And then you're in a chat, right? Like then your situation can become a conversation with that other person live.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously what I spend my days thinking about. So I am sold.
Yeah,
I, I'm curious, like, why do you think like Google Docs or they're like for somebody brand new to build this out, there's a big cold start problem, and it requires there's a question of like what is the right go to market, right? Because people use Google Docs and they use
totally
and
right. So there's a question of what's the MVP, like what gets people using this and not
yeah.
something else.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking about all of the AI writing tools that have popped up, and like, I myself, and I think most people still end up going with whatever basic editor, Google Docs they still use,
Mhm.
and maybe using ChatGPT to kind of prompt it or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I just haven't found that any of these AI editors have kind of managed to radically change behavior
Yeah,
when
I mean,
Google.
so the way that I was first thinking about this, like it's funny, like I'm such an interface guy that I often barely care what the latest technology is. Like, again, Chao Chu and I were thinking about this 2 years ago, and we figured you could build it 2 years ago. Now, I don't think it would be as good as you can build it now with sort of LLM thinky bits, sort of helping manage some of the stuff. But I think like you already could have done a kind of, simple, maybe still machine learning based, but like, uh, tooling for like kind of, answering some of these things. So to be entirely honest, my best guess of what's going on there. um, is about metaphor design, basically. I mean, this is my main frame for thinking about all of design. So you've got some metaphors for um what Sublime is, right? You know, you use some of them. A library, a cafe.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting. When I was thinking about the vibe before you said library and cafe, um, like just before that moment, I was imagining something like, what would it feel like to be in a cabin with only uh like a thing to write on? Could be a laptop, but no internet. Like a thing to write on and a giant collection of books. Maybe even a small collection of books, right? Like, how does that feel? What is the situation? Well, the
Yeah.
situation is I've got some stuff to write. Okay, I'm writing. Huh, now I'm stuck. Okay, I'm pacing. Hmm. I
Yeah.
spot a book. Hey, that book is catching my eye right now. It's not being handed to me. It's just sitting on the bookshelf, but it catches my eye. Why does that book catch my eye today and not some other book? Who knows? But I go and I pick it up, and lo, inside it is something that gets me unstuck. And I only read a few pages of it, maybe. And then I go back to my writing. And then maybe I go, wait, no, hang on. And I like read, a bunch more pages. But there's a way in which I haven't gotten hooked at any point, right? And that feels very different from like, when I like fucking, I don't know, just different things. Like the other day I was trying to understand the relationship between the printing press and the Protestant Reformation. And so then I'm on Wikipedia and I'm reading about one thing, and then one thing leads to another thing, and then I'm reading about early Middle English, and I'm like, all right, I don't know exactly which link in this rabbit hole was like no longer on topic, but I'm definitely there now. Like I um and yeah, there's some, I don't know where I'm going with that,
I,
but like
well,
so as an example of a metaphor, right? So the reason I like Google Docs just last year finally loosened its grip on the page metaphor,
mhm, mhm.
right? So like that's such a it's huge because so many people use it, but it's such a minuscule step in terms of metaphor design, right? Like and so like right? Like a page. Google Docs is writing on a page. But what is writing?
Yeah.
And if the concept is just like I want to think out loud, a page is irrelevant to that. Okay, well, what is thinking out loud? What does it mean to be thinking out loud? So I feel like there's from my perspective, when I look in any of these spaces, as far as I can tell, it's like people are just constrained by the metaphors that they're using. They're like trying to make better docs. And if you're trying to make better docs, you don't think of this,
Yeah,
right? Like
that was a beautiful like stream of consciousness. One of my favorite books, which I suspect you've read, is Metaphors We Live By.
mm-hmm. Only a
And
chapter or two of it, actually.
okay, well, you
Yeah,
seem,
I get the idea. Yeah.
yeah, you seem to really have a strong grip on the idea, but it's precisely that. It is so hard to think outside the existing metaphors.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's why so many of the challenges that we have are interface challenges because we're so anchored on the current paradigm. And yeah, as you said, new metaphors are capable of creating radically new understandings and therefore new realities. So I just love that note. I actually have a 3 p.m. call, so
Hmm.
unfortunately I have to wrap, but that feels like a
Feels,
beautiful place to
yeah,
wrap.
lovely. All right, cool. Yeah, see you around.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Malcolm.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll let
follow
you know what I think
up.
of Sublime.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously, as you know, you're a builder yourself. We're early, but I'll follow up with a note and give you, free premium access. And yeah, lovely meeting you. And yeah, love everything you're doing. If I could ever support in any way, just let me know.
Cool, thanks.
All righty.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.